Hi, and welcome to the Human Side of Business podcast. I'm Ange McCabe, CEO and co-founder of Intuitive Performance. I'm a performance coach, HR professional, whole person leadership facilitator, and your host. The Human Side of Business podcast is fueled by the genuine curiosity to understand how personal characteristics and skills can be leveraged to drive individual and team performance, tangible outcomes, and ultimately organizational success within business. Each podcast is devoted to sharing knowledge, expanding our learning edges, and exploring the trends in corporate culture towards growing the emotional intelligence of organizations. I'm so glad you're here. Hi, everyone. I'd like to give a warm welcome to Cassandra Rose, who's with us today on our podcast to talk about leveraging HR to support employees' physical, mental, and financial well-being. Before we go there, though, and dive deep, I'd like to tell you a little bit more about Cassandra. She has over 15 years of HR experience. She's certified as a senior professional in human resources through SPHR, SHRM, and SCP with a B.B.A. in business management, master's degree in human resources and employment relationships, and a professional certificate in diversity, equity, and inclusion. So sounds to me like she does all the things. Having led roles at multi-billion-dollar global brands and unicorn startups, Cassandra has developed proven strategies which positively impact the physical, mental, and financial well-being of employees and guides organizations committed to DE&I to embed equitable practices. She activates an organization's unique opportunities to align culture, processes, and systems, and the investment in their people, which is absolutely stellar, I would say. She has designed solutions in which include DEI initiatives, employees' benefits planning, enhancing employee engagement and workplace culture, global mobility and immigration, and HR and information systems optimization. As a recognized industry thought leader, Cassandra has contributed to numerous Forbes, HR Council articles, and leading HR podcasts. A very warm welcome. Thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes.
I really appreciate it.
Yes, it's my pleasure. And so let's dive in here. Like, what lights your fire when it comes to knowing and utilizing HR as a leverage for your employees' physical, mental, and financial well-being?
Yeah, well, and I'll actually take it a step back into how I even got into the space. So
yeah, for sure.
Human resources sometimes is this mystified box, right? Of just like, I know those people exist. I try to avoid them unless I need something. I kind of refer to our industry as pipes, right? Whenever you go to your bathroom, when you flush and you wash your hands, you never go, pipes, thank you so much for bringing this water into my home and making sure everything's working, right? That's not what happens. It's only when something
not at all.
And you have a $300+ bill from your plumber that you're like, man, I didn't realize all those times that it was just working perfectly, how easy it made life. And so I think the best HR practitioner is really there in the background to make sure things are going seamlessly. So when I think about what brings me passion in supporting people to do their best work, it's how can I create systems and frameworks and programs and events that make people excited and feel celebrated and feel seen without necessarily making it about the thing that they're experiencing at the moment. It should feel as this part of just how they show up to work, wherever that may be.
Definitely. And there's a lot in there to unpack. I'm really enjoying the analogy with the plumbing pipes because it's true. Like it seriously, it resonates me. In a past life, being an HR practitioner myself, you really oftentimes don't hear from leadership unless there's something wrong. Right. So, and that's okay. We want to ensure that there's the supportive culture in the background, or that's the backbone essentially. So amazing. We started talking a little bit in the green room and jamming around in today's world. What does it mean, or what's the whole purpose of HR and ensuring that there's wellness, whether it be physical, mental, or financial well-being and how that's been personified based on what's happened over the past 3 years. Talk to me about that.
Yeah. So when I think about what's going on, I like to refer to a meme I saw where it's like wildly gesticulating around myself and saying, all of this is happening. So much is happening in so many different global corners of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And before, we used to be almost insulated, not just geographically, but even by the sources of information we're receiving.
Absolutely.
Now you can get an alert of something that's happening 6,000 miles away from you, but it feels as though it's happening literally within your home.
Mm-hmm.
And so, how do we navigate through humanity how we interact with the global community, how we interact with our local community, even how we interact with ourselves? One of the things that I really enjoyed reading recently was actually your blog post about work-life integration and how we're shifting from work-life balance, right? Like, let's do really, really well in these two separate areas in our lives, but never let the two touch. And now we realize that's not practical. Like, how can I just stop whatever is going on with my kids or my health or my finances, make sure at 8:59, I checked it all out. And at 9 a.m., I'm just this like super productive robot who's just giving outputs, right? And just trying to get to that next promotion or that next salary increase. It's not practical. And what I think the pandemic, if you can find some benefits in it, has enabled us to be like, no, this is who I am. Like, this is my home. This is the situation that I'm in. And I think, like others, hoped that post-pandemic, we'd go back to a broader understanding of each other, of the world. And for some reason, globally, and I'm based in the US, even within the US, workplace burnout is actually still at an all-time high.
Yeah, it's huge. Yes.
Why is that still happening, right? When we've said, show up as your authentic self, where we've said we believe in supporting people in their beliefs and in what they choose to, pursue as passion, why do people still feel this like level of incompatibility with their workplace? And I think where HR professionals really can lead the charge is finding out, how do we futurize and bring that into the present of work? What does work-life integration truly mean? And are we still adopting old policies, but asking people to do new things? I think that's really where the disconnect is.
Absolutely. I wanted to interrupt you like 5 times because there's so much to kind of pull there. So kind of going a little bit backwards there, Cassandra, thank you. Humbled about your compliment with regards to our blog post. We try to ensure that we're pushing out information that is of quality and value to others. So that's a fantastic kind of plug. Thanks. But I strongly believe that when it comes to this whole work-life integration, a few things has kind of happened. And we've seen this through, over thousands of hours of coaching and over 5,000 leaders that we've trained in the past 3 years, is that there's this expectation that we were supposed to take this pause in time to figure out what's a priority with our time. But then now that we're back in the workplace, it's almost like for some organizations that has been erased. And it's like, okay, well, we need to go back to how we were. Whereas a lot of the team members are like, but it's not the same. Remember this epiphany that we've had? So there's a little bit, I feel, of natural tension around shifting of beliefs and habits. And to your point, which is very valuable, around, you can't separate the person from the workplace. So what does integration mean? And for some of our clients, what we've seen work out really well are things like, they have agreed upon timelines. And as long as those timelines are hit, it's quality of work, clients are happy, provided that you can work in a hybrid workplace, because some jobs you just simply can't. But giving more team members latitude and trust. And when those team members are identifying that there's family issues, showing that you're going to walk the walk, not just talk the talk, right? Because oftentimes what we've seen happen with other organizations with more of an archaic mindset, it's like, oh yeah, for sure. Of course. Integration. Yes. Work and life. We get it. Of course. We're family. But then when Ange has to go off of work because of family matters, her phone's still getting blown up, with regards to
Mm-hmm.
requests and rush, right? Whereas in actuality, it's giving individuals time and space to digest what's happening in their family. And by the way, maybe they need DoorDash because having to cook that meal or having not to cook that meal could make the difference in the sense of them staying or leaving your organization. So I think in short, we've taken for granted and have more of a Fordism leadership mentality where it's like, what can you do for us? And I can replace you easily, right?
Right.
Versus we're moving into that mentality of we have to figure out what motivates our team members and look at them as that whole person, I think is what I was hearing a lot of.
Yeah, absolutely. About whole personhood. And so I think everyone should feel empowered to show up like that for themselves. And what I mean by that, it's easy for me to say, hey, HR, or hey, manager, go do that, right? But guess what? HR made up of people, managers made up of people. And sometimes they're also trying to figure out, like, how do I show up at work for me, for my team, for this employee community that I'm responsible for? How can I support Ange when she needs to go out for a family event, and the other person who's out on my team, but still get this work done, report up, report down, report sideways? It almost feels like this never ending loop. And one of the things that I like to bring into that scenario always is grace. Provide yourself with grace. And as an employee, someone showing up in the workplace, what are your priorities? And sometimes this can sound a little selfish, but what are you trying to get out of that job?
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I do when I'm meeting a direct report for the first time, bringing someone onto my team, is what's the job you want after this? And I remember speaking to one person, they were like, I've never been asked that question of my manager before. I was like, I want to know what your plans are.
Mm-hmm.
So that way, as opportunities come up, as different responsibility shifts within the team, as much as possible, I want to align those things for you.
Absolutely.
Because I don't anticipate that you and I are going to work together for the next 4 years. If we do, cool. I hope we become really good friends too. But most likely that's not going to occur. So in the time that we have together, what can we accomplish? And why would you feel that you are better off for having been part of a team that we work on together? And
so
that
well
to me
put.
shifts the tone.
Absolutely. I guess what's coming up for me, I'm having this epiphany right now on the spot, Cassandra, is what is it that we need to actually flick that switch? Because we're talking about work-life integration. We're using the buzzwords of empathy and emotional intelligence and self-awareness and servant leadership and all these great things. But for some reason, it feels like it's like this big Titanic move in the sense of leadership habits and how we're actually exhibiting them, right? Yeah,
I can see that. I think it's because it feels new, right? To be authentic at work, truly authentic, and just be like, I'm not perfect. I don't have all the answers. Because for so long, even in school, you're rewarded for being excellent. You're rewarded for being perfect. You're rewarded for the 100, not the 80. And then for some reason, we brought that academic sense of success into the workplace. And we think, oh, I have to have all the answers. I have to be perfect. I have to be the example perfect employee, or else my team won't respect me, or else my leadership won't see me as a great fit for that next promotion. And that has to stop because it's not working. It never worked. It definitely does not work post-pandemic and into where we're going as a society. So I think it's really that mindset shift of you not being perfect doesn't equate to you not being a good employee, doesn't equate to you not being a good leader. It really just means that you're being real.
And from a leadership perspective, asking kind of a forward question, why should we care?
Why should we care? Great question. I'm going to answer it two approaches because I think, especially when it comes to HR, both people who are in the HR industry and those who interact with human resources professionals, people kind of think of us as administrators, right? Like all I do is just shuffle paper, hoping that someone gets hired or someone gets fired. And there's really nothing I do in between that, right?
They don't understand the plumbing. They really don't.
They don't. They don't. They're just like, didn't someone build that a long time ago? You're just here to just keep it all running. Right. And so when I think about why we should care is from an employer side, I care because I can't keep replacing employees every 6 months. I'm never going to get great work product if people are constantly leaving, if people are disengaged.
Absolutely.
Right. You're losing not just great talent, but I'm telling you, it's hitting your bottom dollar. So if you're an employer listening to this and you're like, this is fluffy, stuffy, woo-woo stuff, cool. I guarantee you, if you were able to keep most of the people who've left your organization in seat 12 more months, you would have seen higher productivity and better results.
Absolutely.
Bar none.
Absolutely.
And then why we should care is, guess what? Those people that you employ, they also live in communities. And communities are impacted by people's ability for social upward mobility. So when we're thinking about how you want your workplace to look like, how you want your community to look like, your neighborhood, the schools that you send your children to, the supermarkets that you go, all of that is intertwined. So when people are like, I don't feel like that's really important. What's the world that you want to live in? What's the world you want to leave behind for your loved ones? If you care about that, you must care about where we spend most of our waking hours, the workplace.
Definitely. I think it's so beautiful how you've tied it to the higher social level, because most companies or most leaders would not make those connectors. And it's really important to understand and take away, if anything, from this podcast, that what you do at work, which is what, I don't know, 90% of our waking hours, I would say 80%. It's really important because it has a social impact, not just on that person, but that person's community and the lens and how we're also bringing up our children within our education systems, et cetera, et cetera. Beautifully put. So you said something earlier that piqued my interest from a people and culture and HR perspective, where it's like HR programs and or services, we'll say, operate in the background so things are just easy for their team members. What does that mean?
I love that. So I worked at a pharmaceutical company. I won't say the name of it. You can check me up on LinkedIn to see which one. And I remember a scientist coming in for an interview. This person had PhD, MD, all of this stuff. I'm like I literally was intimidated because at that point in time, the working function. And so I was him around just from interview room to interview room and just, keep chatting him up if the interview was running late. And I was like, wow, your resume is so impressive. I could never do what you do. And I just want to put in context. This was very early in my career, probably like a year or two out of school. And he turned to me, he said, I could never do what you do. You meet with people all day of all walks of life, and you make small talk and you make this a very nervous situation very comfortable. Thank you. And I was floored that this person who has all these expertise, interviewing for a top job at one of the largest companies in the world was like, hey, coordinator, I can't do what you do. That blew my mind. And so when you think about, hey, how can we show up for people? How can we reward people? How can we meet their needs? It's that everyone brings something to the workplace that's intangible. Yes, there's a job description and there are job responsibilities. And as I usually say, that's why we pay you money to do that part. But everything else that you contribute is something that I can't necessarily tabulate. I've seen roles where one person was in it and we needed 3 people to cover for them, right? Because they were just giving in a way that we weren't even able to honestly notice how much value they were adding. So when I think about your question of how do we view people and how do you unpack what it means for everyone to contribute, that's the example that comes to mind for me.
That's amazing. And what's coming up for me is the individual that was interviewing appears to be both emotionally intelligent and humble. Like those are true leadership characteristics, right? So regardless of what acronyms you have behind your name and your experiences or exposure to the world from a social media perspective, it's really important to stay humble and be reflective and or grateful for the things that are different from your own persona. So I appreciate that story. I think that's fantastic. Help me understand, what is it that you feel attached to in imparting knowledge to leaders around this day and age when it comes to work-life integration? How do you help those leaders switch those gears?
One, I constantly remind the leaders, you don't have to be the magic. And what I mean by that is, that's why HR exists. That's why the pipes exist, to help you create the magic. Don't always lean to your own intelligence. Don't always lean into your own personal experiences. What are some policies, programs, or things that are already in place that you can leverage, utilize to support, and then you add your magic on top of that? I sometimes find leaders recreating the wheel when I come to them and they're like, I'm already, I want to let this person go. I'm like, okay, well, what happened? Like, where's the disconnect here? I want to be a thought partner with you. I want to de-risk this person leaving. What happened? And they're like, oh, I told them to do this and this. I'm like, did you ever tell them to go to HR for this? Do you know if they just need a leave of absence or an accommodation or any of these things? And they're like, no, I didn't even think about that. Exactly. Right. We've created all these things to support the employee. And all you have to do is almost like tag me in like a relay race. I want to be there to help you. But if you don't even tell me you're running, I can't tag in. I can't take the baton from you to help you and your team and this particular employee. So for any leader that's like, what can I do? What are the things systematically within your organization? Even if you're a small business, what are things that you can refer to them, whether it's a vendor that you already partner with, or an education partner, or finances to help them gain training outside? What are other things outside of you that you can leverage to make sure that you don't always have to be the center of the attention?
And I'm wondering too, if it comes down to, not just comes down to, but I wonder if a huge component we're missing, even from an HR perspective, is imparting on leaders the necessity to be curious and not judgmental. I've seen it too, where, a manager has run a full-on marathon and a relay race, and I'm passed the baton and have to exit someone within 3 hours. Like, I've seen it, I've lived it. And it's not a fun thing. So even though you are tagged as HR or director or VP of people and culture, whatever, you never get used to changing someone's life substantively like that. And so it's a large decision, just kind of jamming on your example. It's a large decision. And I think it's very important and onerous for both HR and leaders to understand that when you collaborate with your HR people, those are your people that are going to help you see all of your blind spots. So It's not just about that team member that's not performing. What about how are we communicating? What about ego? What about expectations versus what we're actually verbalizing? I had a cohort today, and this is purely for this example. I asked them the question, how many of us believe that when we explain something to a team member, it should happen 100% right away? Raise your hands. And all 15 people within my cohort were like, no, like that's silly. That's not realistic. Why would we do that? And then I say, okay, this is a trick question. So how many of us have been frustrated after we explain what we want and it doesn't come back the way we want it? Immediately, 90% of the hands go up, right? So that's the difference between judgment and curiosity, in the sense that we're quick to judge from our own leadership seat versus being curious and really kind of coach till you hit that proverbial wall, right? Like, do we really need to exit this person? Because, by the way, it's going to cost 2 times that person's salary.
Correct.
We know what's going on economically from an HR leadership perspective right now when it comes to hiring team members. And then, the impartment or the loss of knowledge. So it's really important, I believe, that when it comes to supporting and leveraging HR, It's making sure that you're not just doing it from dotting my I's and crossing my T's. Am I Xing this person correctly? But being proactive about it to say, Cassandra, I'm really frustrated. I've explained this 3 times to this person. And then maybe you're going to have a real conversation with me to be like, okay, well, how are you explaining it? Well, I'm explaining it the same way every time. Maybe they don't need it that way. What else can we do to help them out? Right. So I think there's other components there that as a leadership team, we miss. We look at HR very much as an administrative driven process or policy driven process versus our people partner.
People partner is the right terminology. And I've actually seen organizations shift HR business partner to people partner to really center that humanity. And to even click one more time into what you're saying about like, maybe it's your coaching style, but maybe something else is going on with that person. So going back to that physical, mental, financial, like sometimes if something's not going the way that you anticipated, I think it's a great moment to pause. And again, go back to that moment of grace and go, hey, you're not producing the way that you're accustomed to produce. Not up to my expectations, but what I've seen from you. Is there something else going on? And I'm not saying that you need to confide in me, but maybe you do need to go to HR, and just see how they can help you. Because if our basic needs are not met, I used to joke with a friend, the reason therapists charge so much money is because they need to pay their student loans. How can they hear you over the interest compounding on their student loans? Yes. So sometimes what you think is brain fog or lack of understanding is just someone had a lot going on. Maybe they have a sick family member, a sick kid at home. They're trying to think about what to do for dinner and they just missed that one thing that you said to them directly in the meeting and asking again. We are a whole person. And so sometimes it is just going, maybe it's not my communication style. Maybe it's not this person's inability to understand. Maybe there's just a broader thing. And once we get that resolved, we'll be back into the operating rhythm that we need.
Exactly. Definitely. What I'm hearing is curiosity over judgment.
Exactly as you said. Yeah. I think that should be a t-shirt.
Pardon me?
That should be a t-shirt. Curiosity over judgment.
I keep trying to push my team. We have to make t-shirts with our slogans because we're quite a witty bunch. So I'm going to use this as evidence if it's okay, Cassandra.
Yeah, of course.
Really enjoying my time with you. If you could impart one last thing when it comes to this topic of, HR being that people partner, especially from the now more than ever needed kind of physical, mental, financial aspects, what would you leave us with in the sense of that top thing that we should keep in our minds?
That the relationship between employer and employee has always been and will forever be symbiotic. We need each other. And so in that need, make sure that you're voicing what you need to be at your best. And that you're keeping your employer accountable to provide what's needed and be clear on how to get that too. So that's what I would say. Know your power on both ends of the spectrum and make sure you're utilizing it.
Amazing. And if anyone's looking to get a hold of you, Cassandra, how should we stay in touch with you?
Yeah, I put out a lot of content on LinkedIn. So it's just under my name, Cassandra Rose. And I also put out content around benefits and engagement tips on Instagram. So Miss Cassandra Rose.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Thank you, Nash, for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Human Side of Business podcast. I'm glad you could join us. If you enjoyed today's episode and want to stay updated with our latest content, make sure to visit our website. The link can be found in the episode description, where you can subscribe to the podcast, sign up for our newsletter, and learn more about our whole person leadership services. Sounds interesting? Explore the Whole Person Leadership Cohort by Intuitive Performance, a unique program that offers unparalleled support to managers on every step of their leadership journey. Our program features evidence-based assessments, workbooks, group coaching, and interactive learning experiences to help you level up your leadership skills. Reach out today to apply to one of our upcoming cohorts. Until next time, take care and stay curious.